With the third part of this analysis on the members of the Red Ribbon Army in their titular arc of Dragon Ball, we have much to go over if not stretching this to 4 parts. Now, without further delay, we'll focus on the hired assassin Tao Pai Pai. Though not an official member, the world's greatest assassin is hired by Commander Red for the purpose of killing Goku and stealing his Dragon Balls, and the impact he has on the arc as a whole would make it impossible not to give him some focus here. That, and his name meaning peach white white in Chinese, makes him fit enough with inclusion as an honorary member. Much like with Murasaki, elements rooted in and clashing with national culture is apparent. His appearance and role in the story are directly inspired by the Chinese villains played by Korean actor Hwan Jan-lee in Sheijin Daoshuo, Snake in Eagle's Shadow, and Zui Chan, Drunken Master, making it perfect that an arc with so much focus on clashing or varied cultures has a character rooted in Chinese imagery, be hired by a Western army to defeat a character directly inspired by a Chinese literary figure, that in turn is rooted in Indian religion, but that's a rabbit hole for another time and place. The Chinese symbolism and intricacies of his design and character go further than just film references. Not only does Toriyama use katakana furigana above the kanji his name is spelt with to make the audience aware it's not pronounced Momo Shiro Shiro, and thus show he's not a familiar character to the setting, such as with Son Goku, but the kanji that make up his name work excellently with Toriyama's focus on juxtaposition. Peaches became symbols of immortality within Chinese culture as a way of expressing the concept of cultivating oneself internally within art or literature, which fits with revelations in later sources that Tao Pai Pai is an extremely old martial arts master, like his older brother Suru Senin, and his rival Kame Senin, being 291 years old at this point of the story according to the Daizenshu. This works well with Suru Senin and Tao Pai Pai's familial link, as the former often referring to the latter as Pai Pai implies Tao may be their family name. White is a Chinese, and seemingly worldwide, symbol of purity, so Tao Pai Pai being double pure works well as an opposite to his actual personality in typical Toriyama fashion. We are quickly shown during his introduction some of Tao's core traits, in his ego being great enough to name himself the world's greatest assassin, as though a fact, and his contempt for those weaker than himself, with how he proposes to only use his tongue to kill Blue. Already, Tao Pai Pai presents an ego as far above any villain in the manga at that time as his strength is soon shown to be, with what's easily one of the best segments in the whole series with how he kills Blue with one of the most humiliating displays of superiority in the entirety of Dragon Ball. Surfs on a stone pillar he ripped out of a wall and manages to land perfectly where Goku is, in time to kill his new friend and be the first of several villains to make Goku truly helpless against him through sheer might alone. With his display of completely stopping Bora's movements before throwing him into the air, Tao presents a usage of the Chinese belief a master can have their chi flow through the acupoints in their feet to establish an immovable defense, and can reverse this with a display of absolute strength in what's known in Taiji Chuan as Fa Jin. Anyone aware of these martial arts practices are immediately shown that Tao Pai Pai is a true master worthy of his titles. His Dodonpa has similar roots, with its one-finger usage coming from the Shaolin Gongfu belief of Yizi Changon, one-finger Chan skill, where it's believed intense and constant training will allow a practitioner to be able to strike objects without touching them, and cause such damage as organ and blood vessel ruptures, that make it a good basis for a killing technique. This is strengthened by Tao Pai Pai also using the same index finger to execute the tailor after becoming annoyed with him. Though far from the only deadly ki technique fired from a finger in the series, Tao Pai Pai's, as well as to an extent Chaozu's later usage of this, links well to them as a personal technique, which becomes rarer as the series progresses, with many ones associated with certain characters and their symbolism becoming far more of what could be called community moves. The Dodonpa is as straight-lined, narrow, and direct as Tao's approach and personality, with him being direct in his attempt to kill Goku and unwilling to refuse or compromise, with Goku being one of the two characters associated with the Kamehameha at this stage of the story. Tao Pai Pai's Dodonpa is a fitting thematic and skill-based counter with its more concentrated form and the quicker recital of its name as opposed to the Kamehameha's drawn out 4-syllable name. This is even more apparent if realizing that the shouting out of special type names in Dragon Ball and its peers in Shonen Jump at the time, such as Hokuto no Ken or Saint Seiya, is more than just some manga trope and one rooted in traditional martial arts beliefs that shouting one's intent with a strike as a kiai will help strengthen the potency of the move. It's in the rematch that more light is shed on the difference between Goku and Tao on a mental and philosophical level. Some people erroneously label this as a fight where Goku just got stronger and didn't utilize the philosophy of Karin's training, despite him blatantly stating otherwise. Yet it's primarily due to the difference in Goku and Tao's personalities that their positions in the rematch are reversed. Tao Pai Pai asserts that he is the world's greatest assassin as a perpetual matter, and does not try to improve his skills after reaching this level, even when aware he isn't the strongest in the world for reasons we'll speak of soon. Meanwhile, Goku is aware that there's always a higher plateau to reach, regardless of how powerful he becomes. Tao is meticulous on precise details, whereas Goku puts a little plan into things and lets things flow naturally. It should be no surprise Goku's approach is generally considered the superior one in martial arts, as reading an opponent can't be thoroughly done if not able to adapt to the unexpected. It's also this element that allows Goku to complete Karin's training at a far faster rate than his own master, as well as accomplish what took others far longer at several other opportunities. Even without later context of what makes Goku special from those around him at this point, his purity and lack of preconceptions trapped in his ideas of what is and isn't possible would be reason from a Taoist perspective as to why he'd have greater enlightenment quality, or Wushin, and would adapt to certain ideas or techniques at a far quicker rate than others. Tao Pai Pai also puts faith in weapons such as sword or grenade when his Dodonpa is bested, whereas Goku's external strength is cultivated internally, with him kicking the grenade, and he only resorts to his Nyoibo as a means of showing how to counter Tao's sword, before switching back to his bare-handed combat. The Chinese Pai Pai, relying on Western weapons like grenades as a last resort, also shows his willingness to use any resources, whereas the training under Karin Goku went through was a repetitive task to have him master the essence of it. Such an attitude towards Goku's cultivation and improvement being the superior method is of no surprise to anyone with decent knowledge of Taoist or Buddhist approaches to martial arts, and makes the one with such a mindset overcoming his more egocentric opponent being the logical choice for a story rooted in Buddho-Taoist ideals of self-cultivation and martial arts, as well as that made by a man whose mangaka career was far from constant successes with no need for improvement. Tao Pai Pai also rushes to the results efficiently, whereas Goku takes the approach of not only countering Tao's attacks, but taking the time to analyse his style in order to read his moves better before he can decide how to bring the fight to a swift close. Those who criticise approaches in Goku's later fights, such as his warm-up segment against Frieza, that, along with a need to conserve stamina by not going full throttle straight away, this is Goku directly applying Karin's teachings many years after Karin's physical role in the story has lost any purpose. Though I won't go as far as talking much of Tao Pai Pai's return as a cyborg at the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai, particularly when his role there has more to do with Tenshinhan's own character development and growth than Tao's, I will fast forward to the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai arc, as it provides some information on his background with the introduction of his brother Surusenin. First, it's worth discussing the power scaling within these arcs a little. Though an obsession with who's stronger between character A and character B being the focal point of discussion within most circles of fanbase is the reason why many fans at best miss the forest for the trees, or at worst make Dragon Ball fans seem like a bunch of people obsessed with versus matchups, consistently displaying a scale of power is important for a series in which the storytelling is primarily done through action and the framework of constantly getting stronger. Tao Pai Pai is treated with a surprising amount of reverence by characters such as Muten Roshi or Surusenin, despite not only being weaker than both, but that he should also be weaker than all the finalists at the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai, aside from Manwolf and Panputo, based on Roshi and Yamcha believing Goku stronger than 3 years ago would have a difficult time against Kin Chappa, despite Roshi also considering it far from clear of which of his students was strongest after the preliminaries, and Tenshinhan considering Yamcha to be the strongest of the Kame Sennin students after their fight, based on what you'd seen of Goku and Kuririn in the preliminaries. This would seem like a contradiction if not for Muten Roshi's surprise at Goku defeating Tao Pai Pai, despite being aware of his level of strength that he had 3 years prior. This makes it clear that either Tao had great enough skills that even a stronger opponent wouldn't be able to defeat him with strength alone, and it was a combination of Goku's character and training to read his opponent's movements that were major factors in his victory. Tao Pai Pai had slacked off and was out of prime, or he intentionally didn't go after challenging opponents in order to keep up his appearance of being at the peak of his profession. The third option seems most likely when considering he didn't even display the ability to use the Crane School's signature Bukujutsu. With what evidence is presented showing Surusen as stronger than his brother, it could be that Tao Pai Pai felt the need to not test himself at great heights or develop his abilities further than the mastery he had in order to essentially be a big fish in a small pond. What information we are shown of Tao Pai Pai in regard to the Surusen and Ryu school is sparse but apparent. Surusen wondering why he hadn't heard from his brother in 3 years makes it obvious that they keep in touch semi-regularly, but not by enough that Suru would come to the conclusion Pai Pai was dead earlier. He also clearly had enough of an impact on Tenshinhan to become his role model during his time as Surusen's student, but the time frame of when Tenshinhan met him and when he last saw him prior to the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai are very much assumptions. One thing that I will break my rule of not speaking of Cyborg Tao Pai Pai's events is him shedding light on his history with Tenshinhan by saying that Tenshinhan's ideals are as pretentious as ever, and confirming Pai Pai indeed holds no regard for any aspects of Budo ideals of honour or self-improvement, even prior to the Red Ribbon Army arc. In any case, this later context seems to strengthen the idea that Tao Pai Pai is one to not go out of his way in challenging himself, and was thereby one of the many antithetical obstacles to Goku's own ideology of Shugyo, which was the assassin's undoing. Before getting to the leading duo of the army, there's Colonel Violet. She isn't much more than a glorified background character in the manga, beyond serving to prove Blue's opinion didn't reflect the Red Ribbon armies. The anime does flesh her out quite a bit though, with her protecting monkeys at the expense of her subordinates' lives, which displays her morality in placing more value on true innocence over those she knows to be not entirely innocent, as well as the irony when a monkey boy would be what was about to undo her career as a colonel. She also shows both selfishness and assertiveness in stealing from the Red Ribbon Army vault, when acknowledging the army is about to fall and manages to survive, making it slightly disappointing the anime didn't flesh it out even more with several filler segments between time skips. Oh well, she was given more than necessary at least. There's also the mention of General Copper when she delivers the Dragon Ball to Red. Though never appearing, it can be speculated based on the Japanese pronunciation of his name that his design would draw from a kappa and make for quite an interesting appearance at another point in time. Not a loss for the manga, but wasted opportunity for anime filler. Now, we come to Commander Red and Adjutant Black, whose role in the climax of the Red Ribbon's place in the arc makes them more of a duo than separate. Firstly, just looking at them, it's notable when viewing things retrospectively that Red and Black are one of the few cases in the manga of a short and tall duo where the tall member is the stronger of the two, even if subordinate to the weaker one. When it comes to duos, the only major example that comes immediately to mind, with the roles being played so conventionally, aside from one of two best friends rather than master and servant, is in the last arc of the manga with Babidi and Dabura, though even then Babidi had great enough magic to remain superior, and Dabura didn't quite shake up the formula in the way Black did. One of the best moments of this arc is when, realising the pettiness of what Red wanted from the Dragon Balls and what it has cost, Black kills his commander and takes his place. This is a very unconventional moment within Dragon Ball structure, and most battle manga in general, wherein the closest you'll ever get to this being repeated will usually be the assumed leader being overthrown by a villain who was already set up as a greater threat. Not only is it far from a typical formula, but one rooted in the ideas of Hegel's dialectics that Toriyama seems to adhere to regardless of his knowledge of Hegel. To summarize it quickly, it's the idea that if the slave's actively carrying out a master's bidding, whereas the master is complacent or reliant on them, is he really the master, or should the slave take his place? This is an idea that Toriyama uses several times, with its most overt usage being with Babdi, but with the biggest narrative exploration through the Frieza arc, wherein the members of Frieza's army are defeated by a Vegeta who has made sure to increase his power through intense battles, whereas the others have become complacent. Between wasting many key members of the army, particularly treating such an asset as Blue as no more than a test for Tao Pai Pai, and burning through money on lost resources and tired assassins, Black acknowledges all the army has strived for will be ruined if Red wastes their wish on becoming taller, and guns him down to lead the army in a more efficient and focused direction. This can be seen with a visual cue in the obvious image of a black servant overthrowing their white master, but I wouldn't say such a reading is the most accurate when a racial element of this relationship isn't wholly present, unless speaking of the pun created in anime concerning Black's rank. If there's any racial element to be drawn from here, it'd be something closer that of those of any background have the potential for evil, which would be given in any prior generation, but not amongst certain circles of this one apparently, with Black's vision of the Red Ribbon Army being only different in their goal of the Dragon Balls. Despite being obviously very petty, Commander Red's goal of becoming tall is both fitting with the theme of the wishes in early Dragon Ball amongst the villains, as well as understandable for Red. Red is someone who sees himself as having missed out on what are substantial matters of happiness such as friends or lovers due to his height, and decides that sacrificing the lives of many to change this is worthwhile. It's also ironic that, with an army so rooted in preconceptions as to view it as intolerable, one of its key members was bested by a child, or never expecting Buruma to be the Dragon Radar's inventor, and fighting a protagonist whose lack of preconceptions on what is and isn't conventional, we have the leader being a man trapped by his own preconceptions of his value in believing changing his height will solve all his problems, whereas a boy of similar stature destroys his army through his own belief in himself and dedication to his goals. I find it a bit funny that, to use modern terminology, Red's mindset is fairly black-pilled, whereas Black is based and red-pilled enough to say no to weak leadership. There's also the question of how accurate Red's assurance that the Red Ribbon Army could conquer the world without the Dragon Balls was, and I'd say the answer is not likely. Any mention of them being a group that other armies couldn't handle is purely dub exclusive, with the main benchmark of them being someone the police can't handle. With there being plenty of martial artists around capable of dealing with the best the Red Ribbons have to offer, and the King Castle Guards themselves having some specialising in superhuman fighters, along with the resources we see of them, make it doubtful the Red Ribbon Army could defeat the KC Royal Army at that point. Red's plan was at best a gamble, and at worst deluded, and the delusion seems to come with the position, as we'll see shortly. Another clear aspect of Red's poor leadership is how he places blame on everyone but himself in the army. Aside from the obviously poor leadership and selfishness, it shows how rooted in his insecurities Red is, to the point he isn't willing to view himself in any negative light deeper than what he already experienced. With Black's promotion to Commander, however, we see his character flaws come out. Though a more complex character than Red, with his level-headed reactions such as wishing to abandon the Dragon Balls in favour of striking again in the future, or attempting to persuade Goku into joining him, the new Commander Black also has his pride come out in no longer wishing to back down from a mere child invading the base. This could seem inconsistent if not for how we've seen Black be treated. Constantly ordered around by an incompetent commander and believing his own talents to have gone unrecognised, Black's pent-up beliefs are brought out fully and manifest into arrogance. In not wanting to return to a position of subservience, Black clings to the ideas of leadership to his detriment, as some people aren't natural leaders, despite their efforts, and when his desire to retreat returns, the ire he's inflicted on Goku between these instances with his lack of repentance prevents this from happening, as the battle jacket that he believed would keep him safe from his stronger foe internally is externally pierced, and he goes out with a bang. Thus, we come to a close with the analysis of the Red Ribbon Army members. This is obviously not covering Dr. Gero or his creations, as, if I were to go into them or him, a separate analysis of the Jinzo Ningen would be more appropriate. In any case, I hope this has allowed you to look at the Red Ribbon Army in a new light, and if interested in many of the aspects discussed here, such as the cultural references and symbolism within Dragon Ball, or the intricacies of the characters not often noted, please read Derek Padula's Dragon Ball Culture series. He is hoping his 7th volume of it becomes readily available again soon, and that he continues it with Dragon Ball Z Culture.